Morning, everyone. Monday morning. If you go onto my Facebook, you'll see that I went for a little ride on Saturday here in our local area. Go give it a watch. You might enjoy it, you might not. If you're a motorcyclist, I'm sure you'll enjoy it. But over the course of the weekend, yesterday was my day of rest, and I had a chance to look at some alternative media last night or yesterday afternoon, and I came across Jim Breuer, the famous comedian, and he was saying some things that really resonated with me, and I want to try and carry my own perspective of those things across. When you look at what we're seeing primarily in our own country and what we're seeing now also developing again in the Middle East and around the world, is a dramatic change in the world order. And there's a lot of people that are pushing this new world order agenda. But what we're actually seeing is, in my view, the collapse of the plan of the new world order. Now, I don't know if that is true or if this is the new world order that is now coming into effect, but what we're definitely seeing is a push towards the removal of Islamism and communism. It's gotten to a point around the world where, that people, generally speaking, that have the power in their hands of these massive, powerful countries have seen and become cognizant and become aware that the entire, what's the word I'm looking for? Multiculturalism, policy of inclusions, all these types of things, where they had a start, have now become, and were, in a lot of cases, like even in South Africa, were absolutely justified, but have now become a tool and a weapon to infiltrate Western societies with the sole express intention of collapsing those societies. And particularly Donald Trump in America have said, well, that's not going to happen anymore, and we're going to stand up against it, to the point where you can see what's happening in Minnesota, in America, where it's turning into a full-on go between the two sides, with people that are adamant in allowing millions and millions of people into America in order to change the social construct and the demographic of America. And the American federal government has just pretty much said, we're not having it anymore, and we're going to remove those people by any means necessary. And that's what they're doing, and of course they're meeting a lot of resistance while they're doing it. But the point that I want to make today, we watch the news, and I met a guy last week, and he travels around the world on a motorcycle. He's been to hundreds of places, thousands of places, hundreds of countries. And he says that he's from Canada, and he says when he crossed over from Canada into America, he was terrified because of the news that he'd been watching in Canada, that certain places weren't safe in America, and he couldn't go here and he couldn't go there, and he must watch out, and it's very dangerous. And he ended up in Memphis, Tennessee, with this preconceived fear. And he'd been told, he's a white guy all by himself. He said, just stay away from the black guys, they're dangerous, they're this, they're that. And the first people he met at a motel in Memphis was a group of two black guys and a black woman who were in a muscle car, rap music pumping, the whole stereotype that we see on TV all the time. And he struck up a conversation with these people and ended up having the best time. They showed him around, they took him to restaurants, they showed him the whole place. And he says that he had the time of his life with these people. And he says from that second he made a commitment that he wasn't going to watch the news anymore. And that was 15 years ago. And he's never watched the news again. And he's traveled all around the world. And he says in all his travels, because he didn't have any preconceived notion, because he didn't have any of this fear that had been pumped into him by the news, he's had no problems. And in fact, his words, not mine, he hasn't met a bad person. Imagine that. So, worldwide. It took 3.5 months to travel around South Africa. Everywhere. He's been everywhere. And he says it's been fantastic. Absolutely fantastic. So, we've got to start wondering, about what we're being fed, first of all. And second of all, we've got to start wondering about, does it really help us as individuals to live in constant fear of what may or may not happen? We watch in our own country the demands that they're going to do this and they're going to do that and they're going to destroy us and take the farms and this and that. But is living in fear of that possibility going to increase or diminish our experience of life today? No matter what people are going to do tomorrow, it really makes very little difference to how we're going through our day today. And I would encourage people to start living out their lives in a mindset where, and I'm going to start trying to practice that myself. Because I'm the same, guys. I worry about things that really 90% of the things I worry about don't ever happen. And the other 10% I can deal with when they do happen. So what are we really worrying about? We need to start returning to our faith and start looking at what the Word tells us about worry and fear and all of those things, Jesus says, he says, why worry about tomorrow when today has enough troubles of its own? Paul says it later on, perfect love drives out fear. God tells us, fear not, for I'm with you, And though, if what does it say? It says, I will cause 100 or 1,000 to fall at your right hand and 10,000 to fall at your left. We need to start understanding that no matter what happens, first of all, God is with us, so who can be against us? And second of all, we will survive no matter what. No matter what happens, no matter how tough it may or may not get, we will survive. We will make it happen. We will move on and carry on. The reality is that we have a very short space of time on this earth, and to sit and live our lives in fear and to sit and live our lives worrying flat out all the time about what may or may not happen at some unknown point in the future is really no way to live at all. I think we spend most of our lives trying to protect our material possessions, which at the end of the day, we're going to die and we're going to leave those material possessions behind. And someone is, I watch these American pickers and Canadian pickers and these pickers that travel all over America and pick up all the old junk and then polish it up and resell it. That stuff used to belong to someone who valued it. I drive past scrapyards. I see all the scrap motor cars in the scrapyards, and I think to myself, at one point somebody walked into a dealership and was very excited and happy to buy that vehicle and spent the vast majority of his life trying to pay for that vehicle. And look here it lies in the scrapyard, broken, rusted, destroyed. Of what value is that thing really? The house that you're paying off over the next 25 years that you believe is your house. When you die, there's a very good chance that house is going to move on to someone else. Maybe your kids will get some financial benefit from it, but ultimately someone else is going to live in that house and is going to do exactly the same as what you did. Is going to fight and squabble and sweat and flip and almost kill himself or herself to pay for that house, only to one day die and that house just remains there. You can't take it with you. And when you start realizing that, and I was watching a brilliant show now with Will Smith, who's traveling around the world on the National Geographic channel to try and find the meaning of life after his spectacular demise at that Hollywood show where he gave old Chris Tucker a flatty. He's now trying to find himself. He's trying to find out what the value of life is. And he ends up at a Buddhist monastery, and the Buddhist says to him, until you contemplate death correctly and understand that you are going to 100% leave this planet at some point, everything else starts cluttering your life. What you should be working towards is seeking happiness, peace, joy. You know, because those are the things that are really important. Jim Brewer says it like this. He says, all the stuff that we watch on TV, like you watching me now, probably waiting for me to go off on a tirade about Julius Malema and so on, which I do. Like I said, I'm in the thick of it myself. But, you know, all the stuff that we watch and that we worry about, and we type messages to, I see this guy. You know, that is what that is doing, is it's removing you from the things that truly have value in your life. And the things that truly have value in your life is your kids, your family, who you are, your spiritual life. What is the meaning of all of this? You know, why are you here? What are you doing on planet Earth? You know, and obviously from our Christian perspective, you are a spiritual entity undergoing an earthly experience. And it's how you manage this earthly experience that is going to ultimately decide what happens to you after you die. Almost, if not all religions except atheism, tell you the same thing. That when you die, you are going to transition to an alternate reality. But be that as it may, the point of the exercise, okay, is to find a path of peace and happiness and I wouldn't say relaxation, but a place where you don't live in fear, in a mindset of survival constantly. You know, I come from that life. I lived the vast majority of my life in absolute fear. You know, in the security forces and then in crime and in drugs. You know, you spend your life on high alert all the time, looking over your shoulder. And, you know, I've come to a place where I don't want to live like that anymore. And I'm watching the news and that. So whatever happens in the Middle East happens in the Middle East. Whatever these guys want to do in South Africa, they must do in South Africa. You know, it doesn't mean that we must roll over and play dead. You know, but we'll deal with that situation and we'll plan for that situation. But we will not fear that situation. We will live today on today's terms. We will live life on life's terms, and we will enjoy today, and we will enjoy our family, and we will enjoy what we do have, in the understanding that it's not really ours. It's just borrowed, because when we leave, it stays. Live a life of peace. Try and seek peace in your life. Unclutter your life. And stay away, where at all possible, from the hate mongers and the fear mongers, you know. And that's my message for today. Have a lekker day. God bless, guys. Cheers.